Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Ventures Podcast. I'm excited about today's episode with Chase Merlin. We talk about a variety of different things: DAOs, NFTs, his experience as a product manager leveling up into Web3, his experience with InfoToken, a new product that they're launching today as of the release of this podcast, his involvement with BanyanDAO and a dynamic NFT project that he is leading within that community that will essentially allow you to have an increasing number of metadata. Like literally your NFT will become from a seed into a full-on tree as you progress through different journeys within BanyanDAO. So you can check out BanyanDAO at BanyanDAO.xyz, get for more information there, and also just have a bunch of links in the show notes to the different things that we talk about today with Chase. So if you're listening, you can also watch by visiting wclittle.com. There I'll have more extensive show notes to the things that we talk about today. And if you're watching, you can also listen anywhere that you get your podcasts. You can just search for Ventures and it should show up. So with that, please enjoy this episode with Chase Merlin. All right, Chase, welcome to the show.
Hey, Will, thanks for having me.
So I'm excited about this episode because, the last 4 or 5 episodes or so, we've been talking about why Web3 matters and getting to know you and BanyanDAO, following you on Twitter and seeing what you're up to. It just seems like you're up to a lot of really cool stuff that I'm excited to share with the audience today. So would you mind just telling us a little bit about yourself, how you got into Web3?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Chase. So background is mostly as a Web2 product manager. So most of my work has been in early and growth stage startups. So I've typically run growth teams, done a lot of conversion optimization, kind of worked on front end flows. So that's a lot of my background. As far as getting into crypto, so first kind of learned about crypto 2017 during the run up, but kind of for a few years it was kind of just on the peripheral for me. It was really DeFi summer 2020 is what really grabbed my attention. I think certainly there were use cases before that, but I think seeing experiencing DeFi for myself, something like this magical experience, I'm really a fan of this kind of mental model, when suddenly users kind of take a step up in what they're able to do. So that was a real aha moment for me. And then since then, it was just diving down the space, kind of getting more involved, learning as much as I can. And then these days contributing mostly in several DAOs, InfoToken, which is a DeFi focused DAO, and then of course BanyanDAO.
Awesome. So maybe let's start for a moment about product management. What is that in the Web2 world? What does that mean? You said you're focusing on front end flows a little bit. Could you just talk a little bit about what your roles have been like as a product manager?
Yeah, sure. I mean, so there's lots of different flavors of sort of product management, but I mean, high level, I generally view product as the person who's owning and facilitating the product lifecycle. So the roles are generally from starting with determining what to build, so engaging users, kind of going through all the feedback and discovery process, understanding what to build, then working with design and kind of members to move that to the next step, and then eventually working with engineering, QA, delivery, all this stuff to bring these to life, to deliver to users, and then running this process in a systematic, scientific way. So that's generally what I view as product from a Web2 context. And then, in Web3, I think a lot of that stuff still holds true, but there are a number of, there's a number of differences, what product management actually looks like, and Web3 is quite different. Usually there's a lot of other components that aren't necessarily in Web2. We often are doing product in a very specialized way, and there's marketing specialists and community management specialists. In Web3, a lot of times those things get brought into the product role. There's kind of there's a bunch of other kind of differences which I think are interesting. But that's kind of product, or how I view product at a high level.
Yeah, and it definitely gets interesting in Web3 because it depends on what you're building, what the product is, and it's in a lot of projects it is the product is a combination of the community, of the technology, of the marketing, of the roadmap, right? Which obviously lends itself to a lot of people speculating. But when we started BanyanDAO, For those who aren't familiar who are listening or watching to this, BanyanDAO is a decentralized autonomous organization where we are promoting human flourishing by creating a community of entrepreneurial leaders. And basically in the first season, kind of the preseason leading up to an April 29th training day event was all about, hey, everybody, it seems like there's a lot of things in Web3 that are focused on the developer or focused on the just pure technical engineer. And of course, that's an extremely important part of the stack. But to help product managers think deeply about what are the new products that are available in Web3 patterns and with Web3 tools and the new technology, and then why does that matter for humanity? So that was kind of the first iteration, and now we have a number of different projects within BanyanDAO that are, I think, really, really compelling. And you're working on one that I want to get into around the NFTs, the dynamic NFTs. But maybe before we get there, can you tell us a little bit about InfoToken? Like how did you get involved in the project? Tell us what it is.
Yeah, for sure. So InfoToken is a 100-member DAO that specializes in DeFi. So we're really in three main groups: so investing, advising, and incubation. So mostly we're focused on the kind of experimental, like crypto native DeFi, but we do some stuff in GameFi, some other spaces as well. So like just to give it like a bit more what this looks like. So like we've worked with people like Boba Network. We've worked with specific protocols like Redacted. Volt Finance are some of the better known ones. So we have kind of this 100-member base, people with expertise in different areas. And so we're able to kind of spin up these specific teams or specific support groups to help projects on whatever their needs might be. So I think for me, I was sort of just following. So InfoToken started with basically a founder type figure, Gabagool, on Twitter. Gabagool was involved with, I don't know if you caught this or remember this, but there was this whole saga with kind of like Sybil attacks on airdrops. And there were a number of VCs that were kind of playing these games where they were, they were kind of systematically like attacking these protocol airdrops to get these, to accumulate this airdrop percentage. And so there was kind of a foundational story there where Gabagool was doing some work to kind of find who was doing this and try to like bring some light in the community. And so I just followed that whole story. It was like a kind of big genesis story for IT. And then as when Gaba eventually dropped a fair launch for InfoToken, I was kind of following along. I was very intrigued and then joined the group. And then it's been 6-7 months or maybe a bit more later, and it's been fun to just watch from the initial experiment through all the community building to see where we're at today.
Cool. And is it literally capped at 100 people? There will never be more than 100, or what's up with the 100? 100.
Yeah. I mean, no plans to change in the future. We did start something called the Scouts program, which is a way for new members to join who don't have a token. And so this is another kind of set of members that there's a bit tighter requirements on joining. Like these are people who really need to contribute, very regularly to the DAO. And so I think if we look today, I think we're something like 115. But the goal there is really just to keep the community small. There's a lot of benefits from that, of course. Like we've all gotten to know each other really well. It's just a sort of a different vibe or a different model of DAO. Holding with the 100 members.
And how were NFTs involved? Like, is the token to be a part of the DAO literally an NFT, or what was that token model like?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So basically 100 members, 100 NFTs. So these each NFT is basically just giving you access to the Discord and to the community. You also have governance rights over InfoToken. And so these are very basic NFTs, like from a visual layer, they're all the same, but they become very valuable because they're basically your membership or your access to InfoToken and to all the governance that goes along with our regular operations.
And those were originally dropped for free. Did I hear that right?
Yep. Yeah. They were dropped for free.
To people that were already doing work with the DAO, or like who got access to these originally?
Pretty much just like a instant, like kind of just spontaneous fair launch. It was done as an experiment. I think that was really interesting, also for free. And so like practically speaking, most of the people who are in the DAO are people who are following GABA because he just dropped it on Twitter. And so I think though it attracted though the kind of people that were already following that story, that kind of Genesis story. So I think it was a effective mechanism of kind of like the people who naturally joined were kind of aligned around some of this kind of ethos of like transparency and DeFi. But it was really literally just like one day, just out of nowhere, just dropped this on Twitter for free, and yeah, and then there's been a decent amount of churn over time, like
Sure.
people swapping out tokens, especially as it went up. But it was I think a really fun and interesting like Genesis drop.
Wow. Okay. So these were people that were following GABA, drop 100 NFTs. So this is obviously the entrepreneurs listening in. This is a fascinating model, right? Where it's essentially you're creating a gated community based on whoever claims these NFTs, and then you're adding value. Like there's value in that community, and therefore the value of that NFT starts going up, even though it was originally dropped for free. That's cool because you said you're doing what in InfoToken? You're doing incubation. You're doing what? Can you run through that list again in terms of what you're all are up to there?
Yeah. So I mean, they're like inside the group. I think a lot of stuff. People are sort of trading alpha and all this sort of stuff, like informal activities. But the main focus of the group is really investing. So like we have a number of seed investments. So again, I mentioned like Redacted, Bolt Finance, or some of the better known ones. Advising or consulting. So like Boba Network, and we've also done some of that work for Redacted. Tends to be around like tokenomics and go to market, but really depends on the project. And then incubation. And so like, for example, like tomorrow we're about to launch Velodrome, which is a new experimental AMM launching on Optimism. So those are kind of the sets of stuff that we're most focused on. But it's pretty, as you'd imagine, with like 100 members with different expertise, it's really interesting to see like where energy goes. It's very much bottoms up. Like we don't have this kind of like centralized lane where we're pushing things into. It's really just like whatever captures people's interests. But those are the three main buckets where we focus.
Okay. All right. So you just dropped something, because on the day of this release, it will be tomorrow, right? So, okay, you said AMM on Optimism. So for the audience, can you just explain first, I guess, three things. What is an AMM? Why Optimism? And then tell us more about the product that is launching today as of this release.
Yeah, sure. So let me kind of like walk through that. So Velodrome is an automated market maker. So I think people are probably most familiar with things like Uniswap, or maybe of Curve Finance. So these are liquidity pools that allow non-custodial liquidity pools that allow people to trade against arbitrary pairs. And so specifically with Velodrome is a fork of Solidly, which is an improvement on Curve Finance. So Curve Finance, as you know, is a highly successful project that's mostly focused on stable swaps or like-to-like swaps. So for swapping stable coins between each other, Curve is typically where you go to do that. It has very deep liquidity. So Solidly was a improvement over Curve. I could kind of like, there's a bunch of kind of improvements there, but the main thing, the kind of main piece there is that Curve incentivizes very heavily on liquidity, whereas Solidly incentivizes for transactions or throughput on these liquidity pools. So generally speaking, we're trying to allocate liquidity to pools that users really care about, where there's most user demand. So Solidly was a whole saga, which I could kind of go into on Phantom. It had a very quick run up, and then there were some challenges with it. But I think something interesting here is like the team. We also incubated a project on top of Solidly, and so we gained all this knowledge, like walking through. It was almost like I almost, from a product manager point of view it as like an MVP or sort of an initial iteration. So we got to see kind of this full flow. And so now we've taken all of those learnings, and now we are launching Velodrome with a bunch of enhancements on Optimism. So we were kind of chatting about this before, but Optimism is at a place in its life cycle where we're about to have the OP token airdrop sometime soon. There's a lot of protocols who are either moving to Optimism or are soon moving to Optimism. And so the timing was just really, really set up well. So Velodrome is meant to help protocols bootstrap their liquidity. And so it's just, naturally with many moving over, perfect time. And then also just kind of some of the like very good cultural fit with the Optimism team. Optimism is very focused on like long-term value, like really delivering, creating an ecosystem with long-term genuine usage, and so it seemed like a good fit for Velo.
That's good. That's good. All right. So, very exciting. So I'll make sure to put the links in the show notes to that, so people can go check that out on Optimism. Let's talk about your project within BanyanDAO, because NFTs are fascinating topic. I've had a few episodes just specifically on the different nuances of NFTs, but we haven't really done a focus on dynamic NFTs and why that could be valuable. So would you mind just kind of explaining the project that you had this, I think, really brilliant idea for BanyanDAO? And yeah, would you mind just telling us about it?
Yeah. So really excited about this. So we are working on an NFT project in Banyan, so that the main goal here is to incentivize and reward contribution, especially early in the journey.
Yeah.
So if you kind of take a step back and we think about the typical experience in DAOs, so many DAOs have a challenge, like as new users come in, it can be very difficult to sort of match people with ongoing contributions, and also like without sort of ongoing like stable financial kind of bounties and things, it can be difficult to kind of keep motivation high. And so as we sort of looked out into kind of best practices with other DAOs, we have this vision of a dynamic NFT that starts as a Banyan seed and updates as people get deeper into the journey. So as they kind of complete their first tasks, as they get into meetings, as they join a team, and as they sort of level up in their experience and eventually become a leader in the DAO, the NFT metadata will be updating. So we'll have kind of this continuous track of contribution. So the goal here again is really to keep track and to reward people for the work that they're doing, and also to allow them to kind of bring this with them in the future as kind of proof or examples of what they've done. And so the seed or the visual layer will also continue to update. So your seed will sprout, and eventually you'll kind of show yourself as a banyan tree. And so we're still working through a lot of the details here, but I'm really excited about kind of the ability here to, I think, better reward contributors and really help them build up this proof of contribution that they can use in the future as sort of like a mini resume or a mini contributor base to help them earn more opportunities in the future.
And is the idea that these will be soul-bound token or non-transferable token? I know there's a big controversy on what term to use these days on that, but is that the idea that these will be non-transferable NFTs?
Yes. Yeah. I think in the future, I think there are maybe use cases for allowing these to be transferable, but at least for now, the way we're looking at these are really meant to be attached to each specific user. So their contribution histories for you, and so yeah, they'll be non-transferable.
Are we going to make it non-transferable
Mm-hmm.
in the code, or is it just going to be ERC? Is it going to be okay? It is. What do you know off the top of your head what ERC that is? I don't think I do.
I'm not sure on the on the technical.
So anyway, it'll be okay. So that's interesting. And then is it probably won't be on Ethereum mainnet, will you? What chain are you thinking about issuing these on?
Yeah, so we're still having those discussions. So we're going through some early experiments just with POAPs right now, and so we're kind of collecting data and we're kind of checking the experience. So that's again very much like trying to be very systematic with this product management process. But so TBD on like final chain. I think so far we had talked about Polygon as a solid option, but we haven't committed to something specifically there.
Yeah. Well, even that is interesting, right? For the leveling up product managers in the Web3 who are listening to this, how are you even doing that, right? You referred to going through the proper product management process, but just to pull back the curtain a little bit, what is that process? As an experienced product manager, how are you going about working with a DAO to build a product like this? Because I'm just endlessly fascinated by this whole process.
Yeah, I think for us at least, so we have kind of the core contributor team on the NFT project, and so we kind of started out by just doing some discovery in terms of like what are the problems that new contributors face today, what are the problems that the DAO is facing on our welcome journey. Kind of starting here, we also did like typical kind of solution research. So we looked at like what are other DAOs? Like obviously this is a problem that many DAOs face. So how are they facing this issue? How have others kind of used NFTs in this process? And so we kind of took all this data together and we sketched out, I think, a like very exciting, compelling journey with this full-on dynamic NFT. And so we have this idea again, like we talked about, of one NFT collection that is going to continually update with this, with metadata and also flourish over time. I'd say the main thing, like from a product approach, is that we don't have anything like this in Banyan today. And so going from like 0 to 1, like going from kind of nothing to building this dynamic NFT is a decent leap. It requires a decent amount of development and effort. It's sort of it's a fairly big bet. And so just like generally like reducing different hypothesis, this is really going to have the output that the outcomes that we expect. And so we're currently running these smaller scale experiments with POAPs. So the nice feature with a POAP, with the proof of intents protocol, is that we don't need custom development effort to run this. And so we can essentially test this general concept. It won't be quite as good. There'll be, it's certainly a smaller version of this, but we can kind of test this and work out any kinks ahead of time so that we feel quite certain when we're going through all the development effort of actually building out the dynamic NFT. And so we're kind of launching this series of POAPs through the experience. We're going to learn. We're going to see, what issues the users face. For example, like some users in Banyan, may not have a wallet. There's all these sort of small things, that edge cases and stuff that we want to work out. And so we want to kind of solve these, or at least have exposure to them, and then come back and build the full journey.
Cool. So this will be like leveling up, like I'll become a level 32 banyan tree or something, and I'll be able to use that as my profile pic on Discord or something. Is that kind of the idea?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, these aren't in like the style of a PFP, but I think the goal here is that, from kind of like a pride in what you've accomplished, and just from an artwork point of view, I think, it will be, I think it's going to be pretty cool here, especially, it really takes a lot of work, or it will, to kind of level up and get all the way through the banyan tree. And so I think the hope here is that people really have a sense of accomplishment, sense of pride, and they want to show these off, both within the community, but also, also externally, and kind of show like, hey, this is all, this is what I've accomplished, through my time in Banyan.
Love it. Okay, so for the people in BanyanDAO or not yet in BanyanDAO, obviously go to BanyanDAO.xyz if you're not yet in, and I think we're going to be accepting new members here soon. How can they help? Like, what help do you need on this project?
Yeah, so I think we have a solid like core team now, but we're always looking for more help. So I'd say in particular, like on the design side. So as we continue to build out new iterations of like the kind of graphic files and animations, that's definitely something that comes to mind. And then also like development. So engineering. So especially as we talked about how we're launching these kind of POAPs, and so in the near term we're kind of de-risking without it, but I think this could be a good project for people who are kind of interested in working with smart contracts, or maybe who haven't before, or who are trying to get a bit deeper. I think those are like two of the areas I would definitely call out. And then just generally speaking, right, like we're going to be launching these soon, and I think we're going to be like working with the community to get feedback. And so like anyone who comes in is going to actually be that's a great kind of place to just get involved in maybe a light way. Is just we'd love to work with you and like get feedback as people come in, so we can continue to improve and make this the best experience it can be.
Got it. Okay. So the call to action here is jump into the Banyan Discord as soon as is it open yet? I know we temporarily closed it while we're getting our act together. So anyways,
soon. Yeah, I think around end of this week will be opened up again soon.
Okay, great. So end of this week it'll be open back up. Then jump in the Discord server. Look at on the projects section. There'll be a project called what? Just NFT, Banyan NFT or something.
Yep, Banyan NFT. Yeah, so we have our own dedicated channel there. To kind of just keep track of everything we've been working on.
Love it. Okay, last couple of questions. I'd love to circle back around to InfoToken. And is it operated as a DAO?
Yep.
You have an on-chain treasury somewhere. What kind of tooling do you use to manage yourself as a DAO?
Yeah, so I mean, we just have one multi-sig. So I mean, we have one Gnosis Safe treasury. We've actually started spinning up some separate treasuries for some of our investing groups. And then we use Snapshot for governance. We do a lot of informal, kind of quick and dirty stuff as well. So a lot of like internal polling. We're not super like tool heavy, but we are managed like genuinely as a DAO.
That's cool. That's cool. Okay. So then the way that people are compensated within InfoToken, what does compensation look like in terms of incentivizing people to do work and do that kind of
Yeah.
all the efforts that you've described within InfoToken?
Oh man, it's a good question. So it's sort of split based on the different groups, but I'll just maybe try to give a quick coverage. I mean, so we have like a standing budget for kind of our operating groups or groups that don't directly bring in revenue, and then most of the groups are projects that are revenue producing. So for example, like Carry for BizDev folks, or for incubating projects tend to have their own treasuries, and so those tend to have sort of their own like per project kind of agreement for the folks who are contributing. But generally speaking, right, I mean, like open governance structure, like anyone's welcome to create a new proposal. But we've tried to set up sort of standing budgets for certain working groups that are have a history of commitment, just so things are a lot quicker, and we're not going like ad hoc, like one proposal every single time. And so I would say it's a constant, like things are moving all the time, and so it's a constant, like constantly updating as we go.
That's super cool. That's super cool. Okay. So then kind of tying all this together, in your opinion, why does all of this matter? Like why are you doing what you're doing, and how does this really, everything we've talked about from the projects that you've worked on, why you're leveling up into Web3, why you're doing BanyanDAO, InfoToken, et cetera, et cetera. Where do you think we're going, and why does this matter?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, this is a really good question. I mean, so at least for me, when I look at like Web3, like sort of like what are the features or attributes that I think are meaningful and important versus Web2? Like, why are we going to all this work to reinvent a new web? And I think for me, like high level, I mean, one would be like the transparency and auditability. Two would be user ownership, and three is composability. We could go through those, but I'll really double down. I think for me personally, like at a passion level, is the user ownership piece. I think is what really excites me day to day. Like we're working for a web here uh, where where objects are genuinely user owned, and then applications are built around those. And so when we talk about things like InfoToken, I mean, like just to be in an organization that's sort of like one of 100, with everyone being on an equal level, and where not only that's true, but like all of this is verified and on chain and held in an NFT in like a self-sovereign way. I just think that's really cool. It's a totally different feeling and model than everything else I've company. I think as we go forward, like I've always been interested in like community-owned organizations and like broad ownership of organizations, but I think Web3 really allows that in a genuine way that's provable on chain, where the ownership can't be revoked, sort of, or changed by intermediaries at any time. So there's a whole kind of list there, but I think for me, like at the end of the day, it's really like genuine user ownership, or a more a more full vision of user ownership on the web.
Love it. Love it. Cool. All right. Where can people learn more about you? Where can people learn more about the product launch today, as of this release? To continue these conversations.
Yeah, so basically Twitter is the best place. So Velodrome Twitter, so that we'll have a bunch of we've had kind of a ton of tweets up to launch. We'll have certainly more tomorrow. And then for me, I'm Chase Merlin on Twitter.
Love it. Love it. Chase, really appreciate your time. This has been great.
Awesome. Thanks, Will. Appreciate it.
All right. A couple quick things before you go. Number one, I have a general newsletter where I write about technology and startups and health science and teaching people to code. And I write about a variety of different subjects that we talk about on this show. So if you go to wclittle.com, there you'll be able to subscribe, and you'll also be able to subscribe to particular topics. If you're just interested in one or a few of them, you'll be notified right when I publish new content in those areas. Number 2, my partners and I at Proto Ventures have a portfolio company called Startup Rocket. If you go to startuprocket.com, there you'll be able to receive coaching guides and customize an operations framework for you and your team and your advisors to be on the same page in terms of what is the appropriate next step for you and your entrepreneurial journey. And finally, if you wouldn't mind leaving a review anywhere that you have listened to this podcast or watched this podcast, it would be super helpful to help those who might be interested in consuming this content as well. Thank you.